the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. The story of the faith began here with the landing of Spanish colonists. It came of age with the formation of a new diocese in 1975 and carries on today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop William A. Wack.
All the titles that a bishop has, I think father is the one that appeals to me most. I'm trying to be a father, an encourager, someone who affirms, someone who challenges as well, but a brother as well, someone who walks side by side with the very people with whom I minister.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. Pensacola is the westernmost city of the Florida Panhandle, an area roughly 200 miles long and 50 to 100 miles wide. It is also the sea city of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee.
The Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee is very vast. It covers 18 counties in northwest Florida. So that's a bit of a challenge to minister to everyone in the diocese, to hear their concerns. There are several different groups in the diocese. You know, we have the beach scene for a lot of spring breakers and retirees. The military is very prominent here, especially the Navy in Pensacola and throughout the diocese as well. We have a lot of jails and prisons. Many, if not most, of the inmates from Florida are housed up in the north in this part. And then we have the government and the university in Tallahassee. So there are many different constituencies in the diocese, but I think that's what makes it so good and so diverse.
Pensacola, Florida was nicknamed the City of Five Flags because of the many governments that have ruled it during its history, beginning with Spain, moving to France, Great Britain, the United States, and even considered under the Confederate States. This rich history, in addition to all the different governments that were in place, includes a deep history of Catholicism in the area.
Now, Catholicism here can trace its foundation to Don Tristan de Luna's landing on August 14th, 1559. He was accompanied by 5 Dominican priests who said Catholic Mass at the landing site on August 15th, which is the Feast of the Assumption of Mary. After several unsuccessful attempts by Spain at colonization of this area, the Catholic Church's presence here was officially established on May 10th, 1781. From the first makeshift church in a converted warehouse on Pensacola's waterfront, St. Michael the Archangel has served the Catholic community in Northwest Florida for over 235 years. And in recognition of its historic significance, the church was elevated to basilica in 2011 by Pope Benedict XVI.
While there was a very early Catholic presence in the area, the Catholic population itself was very sparse. It's not till about 1829 when the diocesan area of what was then the Vicariate Apostolic of Alabama and then the Floridas becomes the Diocese of Mobile, with the Frenchman Michael Portier as its first bishop. Father Portier was born in Lyon, France, and he was a student at the seminary there when he answers an ad to come and be an American missionary. In France, when he was recruited, he found this prospectus that said, "We offer you no salary, no recompense, no holidays, no pension, but a lot of hard work, a poor dwelling, few consolations, many disappointments, frequent sickness, a violent or lonely death, and an unknown grave." Undaunted, he came anyway and began a journey that really helped to develop and create a rich and diverse Catholic community in southeastern United States. In 1825, Portier becomes the vicar apostolic of the new vicariate of Alabama and the Floridas. At the time of his accession, he's the only clergyman in the vicariate and has practically 3 parishes with churches in Mobile, St. Augustine, and Pensacola. In his initial survey of the diocese, as he's traveling around, he is beset with challenges and difficulties: mosquitoes, swamps, snakes, little fresh water, and nowhere to sleep. It's a very, very lonely journey, and yet he perseveres because he feels so passionate about bringing the word, bringing the mission to the people in the area. Portier was known as the father of Catholicism in the area.
Pensacola remains under the jurisdiction of what is now the Archdiocese of Mobile for decades, while Tallahassee becomes part of the Diocese of St. Augustine when it's created in 1870. Now, in 1975, so 100 years later, these areas are joined together with the establishment of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee, with René Gracida as the first bishop.
We are one of maybe 10 dual See dioceses. A dual See diocese is kind of hyphenated, so Fort Wayne, South Bend, or Houma, Thibodaux. Pensacola-Tallahassee is a dual See diocese.
Before Gracida became a Benedictine monk and a bishop, he was a tail gunner in the 303rd Hells Angels in World War II. He flew 32 bombing missions over Nazi-occupied Europe during World War II. As bishop, he used his private pilot's license and would travel around to the different churches he needed to attend for confirmations and meetings. Bishop John Ricard was the shepherd of Pensacola-Tallahassee from 1997 until 2011. He's born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in 1940, and comes from a Creole African-American background. He wrote of his childhood that segregation defined every aspect of our lives, where we lived, worked, where we went to school, and especially where we worshiped. And so he brings to Pensacola-Tallahassee this great sensitivity to how the Catholic Church has dealt with race relations in the past and how it's dealing with it today.
Today, the diocese serves 18 counties in northwestern Florida. The first act of the new bishop was to name the Sacred Heart in Pensacola his cathedral, and St. Thomas More in Tallahassee his co-cathedral.
We have a cathedral in Pensacola and a co-cathedral in Tallahassee. And so I've likened it to being married and having in-laws. I spend Christmas at one place and Easter at the other, and then the next year I switch that. I'm trying to go back and forth. I do a lot of driving in my role as bishop of this diocese, back and forth between Pensacola and Tallahassee.
This is the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart, and it's built in 1967, and it's very much of its time in that it has a distinctively modern feeling. What's interesting is that it's not fully abstract, it's not international style. It really does retain reference points throughout, in the exterior as well as the interior, to very traditional architecture. So the exterior has a sort of Lombard, Spanish Renaissance influence, and so we see that in the shape of this sort of bell tower, even though it's distinctively modern. From its construction, we can tell that it's made from lighter, more contemporary materials, but that its imagery is meant to be read in the historic tradition. So as you enter the building, it's very much a continuation from the exterior to the interior. The interior is quite stripped down and modern, but it still carries a reference. Stained glass. There are divisions of what would be sort of bays that help you to process towards the altar. And sort of Gothic-inspired ribs. The explicit imagery is obscured, but there's some subtle messaging that happens that really relates this church to the history of the church.
So the rector of the cathedral, Father James Valenzuela, approached me and said, what do you think about making some improvements, some updates to our cathedral? And I said, oh, absolutely, yeah. I hadn't thought about it a lot until then. I'm still new here. He described we want to put the tabernacle right in the center, and that would require pushing the wall back a little bit. We want to open things up to make it a beautiful place, not just for us, but for God. As Catholics, we believe that the environment is a way we express our faith and give praise and glory and honor to God. The cathedral is vitally important for us as a diocese because it's the home for the whole diocese. It's the place where everyone can come. They may say, I'm not a parishioner at that place, but they're a parishioner because they're a member of the diocese. So they have just as much right, if you will, to, celebrating here as anyone else. The cathedra itself is significant because it is a symbol. It is the seat of the bishop, literally, and it's the seat of the diocese. And so it's symbolic of Christ. Even when it's empty, we know that Christ is with us.
The cathedra in Sacred Heart Cathedral represents Bishop Wack's role as the apostle of Pensacola-Tallahassee.
I'm one of 10 children. The first 2 are girls, and then there are 8 boys in a row. I'm number 9, 7th son, 9th child. That was really important for me. My family is we say it's the first seminary. So there I learned how to pray, how to forgive, how to share, all of those things. That was very formative to me. Most formative was praying the rosary together every night as a family. It was a non-negotiable. After dinner, we all gathered, we knelt down around the couch, and we all prayed the rosary. 15 minutes together every night, but it was really formative for our family and for me, as it turns out. I knew a lot of the priests and brothers and sisters of Holy Cross at our parish, and so even as a grade school student, I started to feel this invitation, not really to be a priest, I guess, but to keep going, to do something even more. And it just kind of grew from there. First, after high school, I went to Holy Cross College. I went there 1 year and then transferred to Notre Dame after that and was graduated in 1989. The college seminaries, at the time, it was really like a religious-centered dorm. We had morning prayer and evening prayer and Mass every day. We went on retreats, we had spiritual direction and things like that, but mostly our goal was to get a degree with a minor in philosophy. I tried to have as normal a college experience as can be. After I graduated from college, I went to the novitiate. Our Holy Cross novitiate is in Colorado Springs. It was a year of prayer and devotion and learning about Holy Cross. So I think it's in the novitiate that I really, really found, if you will, my vocation or heard that calling. The undergrad was finished, and now it's time to really focus on what I was going to do, what God wanted me to do, and I really felt called to go into the major seminary. So after first vows, simple vows, I went back to Notre Dame and was in the seminary then for 3 more years while I pursued a Master's of Divinity. After I was ordained then, my first assignment was as a deacon and then an associate pastor in a parish in Colorado Springs, and I loved that. I was a baby priest. I was learning how to preach, how to preside, and the parish there, they helped to form baby priests, young priests and deacons well, because they've done this a lot. So that's very formative for me and memorable because that's where I really learned how to preach. They would be honest and they would say, wow, you were really off this Sunday or something like that, or you lost me. And that was really helpful. It's painful to hear, but it was helpful. You don't get that very often later on in your vocation. And then after that, I asked to go back to a place where I'd served in the summer in the seminary, and that was a soup kitchen along the lines of the Catholic worker movement in Phoenix, Arizona. It was very rough, very dramatic, sometimes violent, sometimes very difficult ministry. But for 6.5 years, I did that and loved it. It was corporal works of mercy every day, feeding the poor, helping the homeless and the hungry, visiting the sick, etc., every single day. And I really liked that a lot. Perhaps that was my favorite ministry of all. Then after that, I served back in campus ministry for a little while at Notre Dame. And then I served 8 years as a pastor in a parish in Austin, Texas, St. Ignatius Martyr.
On May 29, 2017, His Holiness Pope Francis named Father Wack as the 6th Bishop of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee.
I remember it was a Saturday in May. We just celebrated the 8th grade graduation mass and took pictures with all the kids and their families and then said, okay, great, goodbye. They're gone, they're graduating. And then I had to go look at the air conditioner because during that mass, the lightning struck in the area or whatever, and the air conditioner had lost half of its power. And the phone rang and it said unknown number, Washington, D.C. And I thought, maybe it's the White House. Probably not. It's probably scam, but here it is. I said, hello, and as soon as I heard his voice, hello, I am Archbishop Christophe Pierre, just the hair on the back of my neck just went up. I just kind of doubled over. And so much so that he said, did you hear me? And I said, yeah. Who are you? Why are you? How did you get my? What do you want? And he said, calm down. What I will tell you now will change your life forever. Well, that's not what you say when you want someone to calm down. He established who I was and who he was, and then said, are you ready? And then he announced what he had called me to do. As he's speaking, and it seemed like slow motion, honestly, my biggest thought was, how could I ever leave this parish? I'm not ready, I don't want to. I never wanted to do anything else. And then the next thought is, how could I leave Holy Cross to go to a diocese? A lot of these thoughts, and so much so that I think I was crying, I was upset at a certain point, and he said, are you okay? And I said, would you give me a moment? I collected myself enough to say, don't you remember when you got this call? And I love his response. He said, yes, very emotional, very emotional. Anyway, I need an answer from you. See, when he said, Pope Francis wants an answer, what should I tell him? I said, yes. Kind of almost exactly like that. I didn't want to hesitate too much, but I didn't want to say yes. But I said, yes. With the help of God, I say yes. He said, you may tell no one for 9 days. Your bishop knows and your provincial will know. But I said, well, okay, but my younger brother is a priest. Could I please tell him? And he said, okay, you can tell him just a few days before, but he is bound by the strictest papal secrecy. And he was just about to hang up, and I said, but again, what about my parents? Wouldn't that be neat to tell them before they read about it? You may tell your parents 1 day before, but they are bound by the strictest secrecy and all of that. So then he said, goodbye, click. Immediately after hanging up the phone, first of all, I pushed some button on the air conditioner and the whole thing worked, so that's maybe my first miracle. And then I went outside that enclosure, and the youth group there came and surrounded me. Hey, Father Bill, how you doing? And then one of them said, are you crying? Have you been? And I said, oh my gosh, no. Wow, no, just the allergies. Okay, tell you what, you guys, I'm just gonna go in church and pray. And okay, and they ran off, and then I went in church and just kind of fell down on my face, basically, and prayed.
As bishop, William Wack has strived to live out his apostolic mission as a successor of the apostles by emphasizing his role as the chief pastor of his diocese.
It has been quite a transition from priesthood to being a bishop. Of all the titles that a bishop has, I think Father is the one that appeals to me most, because I'm not a great administrator. I'm not a great manager of people, but I love people. I'm trying to be a father, an encourager, someone who affirms, someone who challenges as well, but a brother as well, someone who walks side by side with the very people with whom I minister. Our focus is, and the Holy Father keeps mentioning this, is going out, is taking the gospel out to the people in the streets or in the hospitals or in prisons. And so having that opportunity really reminds us, oh yeah, we should be doing this everywhere and all the time. But also, prison ministry can instill upon the minister and the volunteer this renewed sense of hope. It can be a place where there isn't a lot of hope in the future, especially if someone has a lifetime sentence or is on death row. But to remind people, just as we remind ourselves, that this ends in glory. We have an infinite amount of hope because our Lord is with us and has told us that if we follow him, we too will reign with him in heaven.